She thought she was only kissing her ex-husband's best friend to provoke him. But what she didn't know was that one impulsive kiss in a crowded Chicago gala would quietly unravel everything she believed about love, betrayal, and even herself. Because Marcus Hale was never just the best friend. And that night, he didn't pull away. He responded. And somewhere between revenge and silence, Elena Marlowe accidentally stepped into a love story she could no longer control. Before we continue, if stories about love, second chances, and emotional healing resonate with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Because sometimes the most unexpected love stories begin in the aftermath of heartbreak. Now, let's continue. At 42 years old, Elena Marlowe had mastered something most people never truly learn. How to look fine while quietly falling apart inside. To the outside world, she was composed, elegant, controlled. The kind of woman who never raised her voice in meetings, never arrived late, never let emotion slip through the cracks of professionalism. But that was only the surface. Beneath it lived a woman who had already survived the kind of heartbreak that rewrites your entire understanding of love. Her marriage to David Marlowe had lasted 20 years. 20 years of shared mornings, shared goals, shared sacrifices. Or at least, that's what she thought. Until the night everything collapsed. She still remembered it with unsettling clarity. A late evening. A forgotten laptop. A message that wasn't meant for her eyes. And just like that, without warning or ceremony, she discovered she had been living beside a stranger wearing her husband's face. Another woman. Younger. Confident. Comfortable in a world Elena had helped build. And worse. Not just a mistress, but someone tied directly to David's expanding business network. That was the moment Elena understood something brutal. This wasn't just betrayal. It was construction. A second life carefully built while hers was being quietly erased. The divorce that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of ending that happened slowly, like a door closing in a long hallway you didn't realize you were trapped inside. And when it was finally over, Elena didn't feel free. She felt displaced. Now she lived alone in a smaller apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. A view that once symbolized peace now felt like distance. Her life had become precise in its simplicity. Work. Home. Emails. Reports. Occasional compliance audits for corporate clients who never remembered her name but trusted her judgment. She wore calm like armor. She spoke like every sentence had been edited twice before leaving her mouth. And she avoided anything unpredictable. Especially love. Because love, in Elena's experience, was never gentle. It arrived softly. And left violently. David, however, never truly left her world. He simply changed shape inside it. He still appeared at professional gatherings. Still stood in rooms where she was forced to stand too. still smiled like a man who believed history belonged to him alone. And worst of all, he always made sure she saw him with someone new. Always new. Always younger. Always intentional. It wasn't love anymore. It was messaging. A silent reminder of replacement, of erasure, and of control. But there was someone else who never stopped watching her. Marcus Hale. David's best friend. Or at least, that's what everyone called him. Marcus was different in a way Elena couldn't easily explain. Where David filled rooms with polished charm, Marcus occupied space with silence. Where David performed confidence, Marcus observed it. He had once been a rising figure in investment strategy, sharp enough to earn respect, dangerous enough to unsettle competitors. Until a financial scandal inside his firm forced him to step back from public finance entirely. Now he worked in private advisory roles for charitable foundations across Chicago. Always present in elite circles, but never fully belonging to them. And when Elena first met him years ago, she barely noticed him beyond his connection to David. He was just there, a shadow in the background of her marriage. A man who spoke little, smiled less, and seemed permanently positioned on the edge of conversations rather than inside them. But after the divorce, something changed. Because now he didn't feel like background noise anymore. He felt like awareness. Like a question she hadn't decided whether to answer. Chicago's upper professional world was beautiful in a way that felt almost artificial. Glass-walled hotels overlooking the river. Fundraisers where conversations sounded like soft negotiations. Corporate galas where laughter was measured carefully, like currency. Wine glasses that cost more than honesty. Elena moved through all of it effortlessly. She had to. Her reputation as a legal compliance consultant depended on precision, neutrality, and restraint. Emotion was not an asset in her field. It was risk. And she had already paid enough for emotional decisions in her past life. So she learned to disappear inside professionalism. To nod at the right moments. To smile when required. To never linger too long in anyone's gaze. Especially Marcus's. Because he looked at her differently than everyone else did. Not with desire. Not with pity. But with something harder to define. Recognition. As if he saw the parts of her she hadn't admitted existed. David Marlowe never raised his voice anymore. He didn't need to. He had perfected something far more effective than anger. Control through familiarity. At events, he would approach her casually, as if nothing had ended. As if time had politely paused and waited for them to resume. "You still overwork yourself," he once told her with a faint smile. "You always did." That sentence used to feel like intimacy. Now it felt like ownership disguised as memory. Elena rarely responded. Silence was safer. Silence denied him reaction. But silence also meant he still occupied space inside her life. And David knew it. That was the worst part. He always knew. It happened at a foundation gala in downtown Chicago. A charity event hosted inside a luxury hotel overlooking the river. Elena hadn't planned to attend, but her firm was assigned to oversee a compliance review for one of the sponsors. So she came. Because responsibility always outweighed emotion. She arrived in a muted navy dress. Hair neatly pinned. Expression carefully neutral. A version of herself designed for survival in rooms like this. And the moment she stepped inside, she felt it. The shift. David was already there. So was Marcus. And something about that combination made the air feel heavier than usual. David saw her first. Of course he did. He always did. He approached with that familiar, effortless smile, the one that used to make her believe she was chosen. "You're still working too hard," he said softly as he leaned in. "You always did." Elena didn't answer. She simply looked at him. And let silence do what words could not. Then Marcus stepped beside him. Not dramatically. Not aggressively. Just present. And said quietly, "Let her breathe." The words weren't loud. But they landed. David chuckled under his breath, amused. "Oh, still playing protector," he said, glancing at Marcus. "You used to be better at choosing sides." Something tightened in Elena's chest. Not sadness. Not anger. Something more dangerous. Awareness. Because in that moment she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. David still believed he owned emotional space around her. And Marcus was not correcting him. He was enduring him. For her. And that realization unsettled her more than anything David had ever done. Later that night, after conversations blurred into background noise and polite laughter grew exhausting, Elena stepped outside onto the terrace overlooking the river. Chicago lights shimmered below like fragments of a life she no longer fully belonged to. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. Marcus. And everything was about to shift. The Chicago air outside the gala was colder than Elena expected. Not physically at first, but emotionally. It always felt that way after too many polished conversations and forced smiles. Like stepping out of a curated world and realizing your real thoughts had been waiting for you in the silence. She stood near the terrace railing overlooking the river. The water below reflected fractured lights from the city skyline, gold, white, distant red, like memories that didn't belong to her anymore. That was when she heard footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. She didn't turn right away. She already knew who it was. Marcus Hale. He stopped a few feet beside her instead of too close. That alone felt intentional. For a man who said so little, Marcus had a strange awareness of space, of distance, of timing, of when not to interrupt silence. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said quietly. Elena gave a faint, almost tired exhale. "I'm not alone," she replied. "I'm just outside the noise." A pause. Then Marcus said, "That's still alone." It wasn't argumentative. It wasn't even challenging. It was just observant. And somehow that made it worse. Because Elena realized he wasn't trying to win anything from her. He was simply noticing her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The river moved slowly below them. The city continued its indifferent rhythm. Then Elena finally asked, without looking at him, "Why do you always defend people you don't even like?" A faint shift in Marcus's expression. "I don't defend him," he said. "Then what do you do?" she asked. Another pause. This one longer. "I correct imbalance," he replied. Elena almost laughed, but didn't. "That sounds like something a lawyer would say." "I used to work with them," he said simply. That caught her attention. She turned slightly toward him. "You used to work in finance," she corrected. "I did both," Marcus said. "Before I stopped doing things that didn't align with what I could live with." That sentence lingered. Aligned with what I could live with. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it felt like something a person only says after losing something important. Or walking away from it. Elena studied him now more openly. Not because she was drawn to him. Not yet. But because something about him didn't match the roles people assigned to him. David's intense best friend was how she had always categorized him. But that version didn't explain the man standing next to her now. He wasn't performative. He wasn't trying to be seen. And yet somehow, he was impossible to ignore. "You don't talk much," Elena said. Marcus nodded slightly. "Most conversations don't require more than they already have." "That's a convenient way to avoid people," she said. "It can be," he agreed. No defense. No correction. Just acceptance of the possibility. That unsettled her more than disagreement would have. Because people usually tried to justify themselves. Marcus didn't. Elena looked back toward the river. "I used to think silence meant something was wrong," she said quietly. "And now?" Marcus asked. She hesitated. "Now I think it means I don't have to explain myself." Marcus glanced at her briefly. "That's not silence," he said. "What is it then?" "Recovery," he replied. That word landed differently. Not heavy. Not soft. Just precise. Elena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let it sit between them. Recovery. It felt foreign in her life. Like a language she used to know but stopped practicing. Through the glass doors behind them, the gala continued. Laughter. Music. movement. And somewhere inside that controlled chaos, David existed like a constant pressure point. Elena didn't need to see him to feel him. That was the worst part. Marcus followed her gaze briefly, then said, "He enjoys this." Elena frowned slightly. "Enjoys what?" "Positioning people," Marcus said. "He always has." She looked at him now fully. "You talk about him like you know him better than I do." A faint pause. "I used to," Marcus said. That sentence carried more weight than it should have. Used to. Not anymore. Not now. Elena didn't miss that distinction. For the first time that night, Elena let her guard loosen slightly. "Do you ever get tired of watching people?" she asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes. That honesty surprised her. She turned toward him fully now. "Then why do you still do it?" A long pause. Then Marcus said, "Because sometimes, watching is the only way to understand when something is about to break." Elena felt something tighten in her chest. Not fear. Not attraction. Something more complicated. Recognition. Without realizing why, Elena said something she hadn't intended to share. "He made me feel like I was replaceable," she said quietly. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Marcus didn't react immediately. No shock. No pity. Just stillness. Then he said, "That says more about his limits than your value." Elena let out a slow breath. "You say that like it's obvious." "It is," Marcus replied. A pause. Then, softer. "But that doesn't make it easy to believe." That line hit deeper than she expected. Because it didn't dismiss her pain. It acknowledged it. Somewhere behind them, laughter erupted inside the ballroom. Elena didn't turn. She didn't want to. She didn't want to re-enter that world just yet. And Marcus remained still beside her, not forcing conversation, not pushing her away from silence. That stillness did something dangerous. It removed pressure. And in that absence of pressure, emotions surfaced. Frustration. Memory. Humiliation. The feeling of being observed, replaced, evaluated. David's smile earlier. Marcus stepping in. The imbalance. The control. And suddenly, she turned toward Marcus. Not slowly. Not thoughtfully. Immediately. And kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It wasn't even careful. It was raw. It carried everything she hadn't said all night. Anger. Confusion. Defiance. A silent challenge thrown into the air like proof she still had agency. Marcus froze. Just for a fraction of a second. Then he responded. Not immediately passionately, but instinctively. like something in him had been waiting for permission he didn't expect to receive. The kiss lasted only seconds, but it changed the temperature of everything. Elena pulled back first, breathing slightly uneven, her mind already catching up with what her body had done. It wasn't desire. At least, not entirely. It was reaction. Control trying to reclaim itself. Marcus didn't move away immediately. Neither did he speak. And that silence between them now felt different. Charged. Unstable. Real. Elena finally said, almost sharply, "I shouldn't have done that." Marcus studied her for a moment, then replied quietly, "Then why did you?" That question landed harder than the kiss itself. Because there was no performance in it. No judgment. Just curiosity. And Elena didn't have an answer she wanted to say out loud. Behind the glass doors, Elena caught movement. David. Watching. Not rushing. Not reacting. Just standing there. And then he smiled. Not like a man betrayed, but like a man observing an expected outcome. As if Elena kissing Marcus confirmed something he already believed about her. That smile unsettled her more than anything else that night. Because it wasn't anger. It was certainty. And certainty meant control. Elena stepped back slightly. "This changes nothing," she said quickly. Marcus nodded once. "I didn't think it did." That answer confused her. Because there was no pursuit in it. No assumption. No pressure. Just acceptance. And that made it worse. Or maybe more dangerous. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this emotional journey of heartbreak, tension, and unexpected love, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes the most complicated love stories don't begin with attraction. They begin with confusion. Now, let's continue. The next morning in Chicago felt unusually heavy. Not because of the weather, but because of memory. Elena stood in her kitchen staring at untouched coffee, her mind replaying something she had already decided she wanted to forget. The kiss. Not romantic. Not planned. Not even cleanly emotional. Just real. And that was the problem. Because real things couldn't be erased as easily as regret. Her phone sat on the counter. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing from Marcus. That silence should have relieved her. Instead, it unsettled her. At 42, Elena Marlowe had built her life on precision. Emotions were categorized. Risk was calculated. And vulnerability was delayed indefinitely. But now, something had slipped through that system. She kept telling herself the kiss meant nothing. A mistake. A reaction to humiliation. A moment of misplaced anger toward David. That explanation should have been enough. But it wasn't. because Marcus hadn't reacted the way she expected. He hadn't chased her. He hadn't used it. He hadn't even judged her? And somehow, that made it harder to move on from. By midday, Elena was back in her world. Glass office building. Corporate compliance documents. Meetings where people spoke in controlled sentences that meant nothing personal. But even there, something was off. She caught herself rereading the same paragraph twice. Losing focus mid-sentence. Pausing when no pause was needed. Her assistant noticed. "You seem distracted today," the younger woman said carefully. "I'm fine," Elena replied too quickly. And that alone confirmed she wasn't. Because Elena never said "I'm fine" without thinking first. Late afternoon. A knock at her office door. No appointment scheduled. No warning. When she looked up, Marcus Hale was standing there. Calm. Composed. Holding a slim file folder. Elena's body reacted before her mind did. Not panic. Not excitement. Something in between. Recognition. "Can I come in?" he asked. A simple question. No pressure. No assumption. She hesitated for only a second. Then nodded. Marcus stepped inside, closed the door gently behind him, and placed the folder on her desk. "I thought you might want this," he said. Elena didn't touch it immediately. "What is it?" she asked cautiously. "Financial inconsistencies," he replied. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "With David's current ventures," he added. That name again. David. Always present even when absent. Elena finally opened the folder. Numbers. Transactions. Patterns that didn't belong in clean corporate reporting. Her expression shifted slowly. "This is recent," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. "I've been monitoring it." Elena looked up sharply. "For how long?" A pause. Then, "Before your divorce was finalized." That landed heavier than expected. Elena closed the folder slightly. "You knew what he was doing?" she asked. Marcus didn't flinch. "I suspected." "And you didn't tell me." Another pause. "No," he said. The honesty was blunt. Almost uncomfortable. Elena's voice tightened. "Why?" Marcus looked at her directly now. "Because if I had come to you earlier, you wouldn't have believed me." Silence. He wasn't wrong. That realization stung more than accusation. Because he was right. At that time, she still would have defended David's image. Still would have doubted the worst. Elena leaned back slightly in her chair. "And now?" she asked. Marcus replied. "Now you're not the same person you were then." That sentence hung in the air. Not a compliment. Not judgment. Just observation. Elena studied him for a long moment. You're very sure of what I've become. I pay attention, he said simply. Something in her expression softened slightly, but only slightly. Because attention wasn't always comforting. Sometimes it was invasive. Sometimes it was dangerous. Neither of them mentioned the kiss. But it was there. In pauses. In eye contact that lasted half a second too long. In the way Marcus didn't lean too close. And the way Elena didn't step back. Finally, she said, "What do you want from this?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. That hesitation mattered. Because Marcus rarely hesitated. Then he said, "Truth." Elena frowned slightly. That's not a complete answer. It's the only one I have. That silence between them deepened again. That evening, Elena received a call. David. She almost didn't answer. But she did. Still working late, he asked casually. His tone carried familiarity that no longer belonged to him. "I'm busy," she replied. A soft chuckle on the other end. Always busy. That never changed. Then, a pause. "I saw you last night." Elena's grip tightened slightly on her phone. She said nothing. David continued. "You're making interesting choices lately." There was no anger in his voice. Only amusement. And that was worse. Because amusement meant control had not been threatened. It had been confirmed. After the call ended, Elena stood still in her office for a long time. Not moving. Not thinking clearly. Just feeling something shift inside her again. Not regret. Not guilt. Something closer to realization. She had not provoked David. She had validated him. And Marcus. Marcus had become part of something neither of them had fully defined yet. Marcus waited outside her building that night. Not inside. Not intruding. Just present. When she saw him, she didn't ask why he was there. She already knew. They walked without direction for a while along the riverside streets. Silence between them felt different now. Less awkward. More loaded. Finally, Elena spoke. "You were right about him." Marcus didn't respond immediately. Then, "I wish I wasn't." That honesty softened something inside her again. After a long pause, Elena said quietly, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." Marcus glanced at her. "That's not unusual," he said. She let out a faint breath that almost became a laugh. "That's your version of comfort." "It's truth," he replied. A pause. Then more gently. "And truth is usually the first step away from confusion." That sentence stayed with her. Longer than expected. Elena stopped walking. "So what happens now?" she asked. Marcus turned slightly toward her. "Now you decide what you want to believe," he said. "That he's still in control. Or that you're finally out of it." That distinction mattered. More than she wanted to admit. For the first time, Elena didn't feel like she was reacting. She felt like she might be choosing. But somewhere in the distance, her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. A message. One line only. "He's not done with you yet." Elena stared at it. Then looked at Marcus. And for the first time, she realized this wasn't just emotional anymore. It was about to become something else entirely. If someone from your past tried to pull you back into their control, would you recognize it before it's too late? The message stayed on Elena's screen longer than it should have. "He's not done with you yet." No name. No signature. Just certainty. The kind of certainty that doesn't feel like a warning. It feels like knowledge. Elena stood still on the riverside street, her phone glowing faintly in her hand. Marcus noticed immediately. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated before turning the screen toward him. He read it once. Then again. And for the first time since she'd known him, Marcus didn't respond immediately. That silence changed everything. "You've seen something like this before," Elena said quietly. It wasn't a question. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Yes," he admitted. That single word tightened the air between them. Elena's voice lowered. "From him?" A pause. Then Marcus nodded. "Yes." That answer landed heavier than expected. Because it meant this wasn't paranoia. It wasn't coincidence. It was pattern. They walked again, but slower now. Elena's mind no longer focused on the city around them. It was focused on Marcus. "You said you used to work in finance," she said carefully. "I did," he replied. "And you left because of ethics." Marcus didn't deny it. "Yes." A pause stretched between them. Then Elena asked the question she didn't want to ask. "Were you involved in David's company at any point?" Marcus stopped walking. Just for a moment. Then said quietly, "I was offered a senior advisory role." Elena felt something tighten in her chest. "And?" "I declined," he said. A pause. Then, "Because I found irregularities before I ever accepted." The words hit like cold air. Elena turned toward him fully. "You knew he was doing this years ago." Marcus nodded once. "I didn't have proof strong enough to act then. But I knew enough to stay away." Elena's voice sharpened slightly. "So why stay close to him?" That question lingered. Marcus didn't answer immediately. When he did, it was quieter than before. "Because I needed to understand how deep it went." Elena stared at him. "Understand, or wait?" she asked. Marcus held her gaze. Both. A long silence followed. Then Elena said something she didn't expect herself to say. And me? That question changed everything. Marcus didn't answer right away. And that hesitation told her everything before his words did. Finally, he said, "You were never part of his business decisions." A pause. "But you were part of his emotional leverage." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" Marcus's voice softened slightly. "It means you were the one thing he still believed he controlled even after the divorce." The words hit harder than she was ready for. Because suddenly, the betrayal didn't feel like something in the past anymore. It felt ongoing. Elena stepped back slightly. "That's not possible," she whispered. Marcus shook his head once. "It is." A pause. Then he added, "And he knows you're starting to see it." That sentence changed the air. Elena looked down at her phone again. The message. "He's not done with you yet." Now it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like confirmation. 3 days later, Elena received an invitation. Private dinner. No explanation. Just location. She didn't need a name. She already knew who it was from. David. Marcus told her not to go. But he didn't stop her. That mattered. Because Marcus never controlled her choices. Only informed them. The restaurant was quiet. Expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. David was already seated when she arrived. He stood when she entered, smiling, like nothing had ever broken between them. "Elena," he said softly, as if the past year had been a misunderstanding. She didn't sit immediately. "You sent me the message," she said. David tilted his head slightly. "I send a lot of messages." That answer wasn't a denial. It was deflection. When she finally sat, David leaned back comfortably. "You look different," he said. "I've been different for a while," she replied. A faint smile. "I don't think so." That sentence carried something sharp beneath it. Not observation. Ownership. Elena felt it immediately. The old dynamic trying to reassert itself. David took a sip of his drink before speaking again. "You're spending a lot of time with Marcus," he said casually. Elena's expression didn't change. "That's none of your business." A soft laugh. "Everything about you used to be my business." Silence. Then David added, "He never told you, did he?" That line tightened the room. Elena's voice lowered. "Told me what?" David leaned forward slightly. "That he was the one who flagged my financial activities years ago." The air shifted instantly. Elena's breath slowed. She looked away for a second. Then back at him. "You're lying." David smiled faintly. "I wish I were." When Elena left the restaurant, her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear. From confusion. From collision. Marcus was waiting outside. He didn't ask what happened. He already knew. Elena stopped in front of him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't move. "Because it wasn't relevant then," he said. Her voice tightened. "It's relevant now." A pause. Then Marcus said something that softened the tension slightly. "I didn't want you to see me through him." That landed differently. Not defensive. Not evasive. Honest. Elena looked at him for a long time. Slowly, her breathing steadied. "You were never his," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. "No." "And you weren't mine either," she added. Another pause. Then Marcus said, "I never intended to be." That sentence didn't hurt. It clarified. Elena stepped closer slightly. "Then what is this?" she asked. Marcus met her gaze fully. "I don't know what it becomes," he said. A pause. "But I know what it isn't." Elena didn't look away. "What?" "Control," he said. That word broke something inside her. Not painfully. Liberatingly. Because for years, everything had been control. David's control. Her reactions. Her fear. Even her silence. Elena exhaled slowly. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was reacting. She felt like she was standing still long enough to choose. "I don't want to go back into that," she said quietly. Marcus nodded once. "Then don't." A pause. Then softer. "Not with him. Not with the past. Not even with your fear of it." Elena looked at him. And for the first time, she believed that might actually be possible. If someone from your past revealed they still had emotional control over your life, would you be strong enough to finally break free? Chicago looked different after everything ended. Not because the city had changed, but because Elena had. The river still moved beneath the bridges. The light still reflected across the glass buildings. The same conversation still happened in the same high-rise offices. But for Elena Marlowe, something fundamental had shifted. She no longer walked through her life like someone trying to avoid breaking. She walked like someone who had already broken and rebuilt herself anyway. The investigation into David's financial dealings had escalated quickly after the evidence Marcus provided was officially submitted. What began as quiet suspicion became public scrutiny. Then legal pressure. Then corporate collapse. By the time it was over, David's professional image, the one he had spent years constructing, had fractured beyond repair. But what surprised Elena most was not his downfall. It was his silence afterward. No calls. No attempts to explain. No final manipulation. just absence. And for the first time in a long time, Elena felt no emotional echo from it. Only closure. Not forgiveness. Not anger. Just distance. Marcus Hale did not disappear after everything settled. But he also did not rush into her life like a resolution. He remained steady, present in a way that no longer felt confusing, only intentional. They did not define anything quickly. There were no declarations, no dramatic confessions, just time, and conversation, and silence that no longer felt heavy. One evening, weeks after the legal case closed, Marcus and Elena met again on the riverside path. The same place where so much had started. But this time, the air felt lighter. Elena stopped walking first. Marcus did too. She looked at the water for a long moment, then said quietly, "I used to think I needed certainty before I could feel anything again." Marcus didn't interrupt. He just listened. Elena continued. But everything that felt certain before was never real. A pause. Then she turned toward him. And everything real was uncertain. Marcus nodded slowly. "That sounds about right," he said. A faint, almost tired smile appeared on her face. "I don't know where that leaves us," she admitted. Marcus didn't rush the answer. He never did. Instead, he said, "It leaves us here." Elena studied him for a long moment. "You never pushed me," she said. Marcus shook his head slightly. "I didn't want to be another version of what hurt you." That honesty softened something deep inside her. Because that was exactly what she had feared most. Repetition. Patterns. History returning in a different face. But Marcus had never been that. He had been absence of pressure, absence of control, absence of expectation. And that had made all the difference. Elena exhaled slowly. "I think I've spent too long surviving my own life," she said quietly. Marcus looked at her. "And now?" he asked. She paused, then answered honestly. "Now I want to live it without reacting to the past." That sentence hung between them. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just real. Marcus nodded once. "That's the hardest kind of living," he said. Elena turned slightly toward him. "But it's still living." There was no sudden confession. No cinematic declaration. No rushing forward to fix everything. Just silence. A long, shared pause between two people who had both been shaped by different versions of loss. Then Marcus said quietly, "I don't know what comes next." Elena gave a small, almost understanding smile. "Neither do I." Another pause. Then she added, "But I think I'm okay with that now." Marcus stepped slightly closer, but not too close. Not claiming. Not assuming. just present. Elena didn't move away. That was new. That was important. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't stepping away from possibility. She was standing still inside it. Elena looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "I don't want what I had before." Marcus nodded. "Good." A faint pause. Then she added, "But I also don't want to run from something that could be real." Marcus didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, "Then don't." And that was it. No grand resolution. No dramatic ending. Just two people standing at the edge of something new, without forcing it to become anything too soon. Months later, Elena's life didn't look dramatically different on the surface. She still worked, still lived near the river, still moved through Chicago's professional world. But internally, everything had changed. She no longer measured her days by avoidance. She measured them by presence. And Marcus? He remained part of that presence. Not as a savior. Not as a replacement. But as someone who had never tried to rewrite her story. Only walk beside her while she wrote a new one herself. Love didn't arrive as rescue. It didn't erase the past. It didn't undo betrayal. But it did something quieter. Something stronger. It offered Elena something she thought she had lost permanently. The ability to choose again. Not from fear. Not from memory. But from truth. Stories like this remind us that love doesn't end with heartbreak. Sometimes, it begins there. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional romance stories about second chances, healing, and unexpected love. And tell me, what would you do if love found you again when you least expected it? Thank you for watching. And don't miss the next story waiting for you.